Cedarbrook Hollow wasn't the kind of place where children disappeared. It was a town buffered from the world by a thick curtain of pine and cedar, where misty morning softened the edges of reality, and the biggest news was the annual bake sale. But for 12 years, Laura Forrester had lived with a ghost in that quiet, safe town, the ghost of her daughter, Emily. At 3:17 p.m., the precise time she returned home most weekdays, Laura pulled into her driveway. The motion was an old, ingrained habit, a small piece of structure in a life that had been shattered and haphazardly glued back together. At 40, her honey-blonde hair was threaded with silver she no longer bothered to hide, each strand a testament to a night spent sleepless. The lines around her eyes, once faint laugh lines, had deepened into a complex map of sorrow. She switched off the engine of her aging sedan and sat for a moment in the sudden silence, the weight of the empty house pressing in on her even from the driveway. She gathered her pastry utensil box and her black and white checkered uniform from the passenger seat. As the head pastry chef at the Morning Roost, her days began in the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 a.m. She found a strange monastic comfort in the precise measurements of flour and sugar, the rhythmic work of kneading dough. It was a science, predictable and controllable. She could turn simple ingredients into something that brought people a moment of joy, a small, tangible creation in a world where the most precious thing she'd ever made had been stolen from her. Laura Forrester was a mother to a ghost. Emily had been 8 years old, a sunbeam of a girl with a bright gap-toothed smile and a cascade of golden curls. She had vanished on a bright, ordinary morning during summer break 12 years ago. Laura had been in the kitchen, the scent of baking bread filling the air, when a sudden, unnerving silence had registered. The familiar sound of Emily's giggles and the rhythmic squeak of her bicycle chain had stopped. She had called out, her voice cheerful at first, then tight with nascent panic. She'd checked the backyard, the front yard, the neighbors' houses. By nightfall, the entire town, a sea of flickering flashlights and worried faces, was searching for the little girl. In the devastating aftermath, the shared grief had become a wedge that drove her and her husband, Mark, apart. He couldn't look at her without seeing a failure, a lapse in vigilance. He had blamed her, his words a corrosive acid, for being in the kitchen instead of outside, for turning her back for a few minutes. 6 months after Emily's disappearance, he had filed for divorce and fled to the anonymity of Seattle, leaving Laura alone with her guilt in a house that echoed with the phantom laughter of a child. As Laura stepped inside, she placed her utensil box on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, as always. The silence was a presence, a living entity that had been her constant companion for over a decade. She was about to head upstairs for a shower when her phone rang, the sharp digital sound slicing through the stillness. The screen displayed a name that made her heart seize in her chest: Detective Dean Harland. Dean had been the lead investigator on Emily's case. In the early days, those frantic first weeks, he had been a lifeline, his daily calls a fragile thread of hope. But as the case went cold, the calls had dwindled, then stopped. Now it was usually Laura who initiated contact, calling the department every few months, only to be met with the same gentle, regretful refrain. "No new leads, Mrs. Forrester." Her hand trembled as she answered. "Detective Harland?" "Ms. Forrester, good afternoon." His voice was deeper than she remembered, gravelly, as if aged by the weight of all the cases he'd carried since hers. "Are you at home?" "Yes, I just got back from work. Is everything okay?" There was a beat of silence on the line, a hesitation that screamed of significance. "Something's come up related to Emily's case. It's important. Would it be all right if I came by to speak with you in person?" Laura's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. "Of course, yes, please come." I'll be there in 15 minutes. After hanging up, a frantic, nervous energy seized her. She paced the living room, straightening magazines that were already neat, fluffing pillows that weren't flat. Her mind was a maelstrom of terrible, hopeful possibilities. Had they found a body? Had someone confessed? Was it a false alarm, another cruel twist of fate? The uncertainty was a physical agony, a tightening in her chest that made it hard to breathe. When she saw the familiar unmarked police sedan pull up outside her window, Laura was already at the door, her hand on the knob. Detective Harland emerged from the car, looking older, wearier. His dark hair was now more salt than pepper, and he carried himself with the slight stoop of a man who had spent too many years hunched over case files filled with sorrow. "Miss Forrester," he nodded as he approached the porch. "Please call me Laura," she said, the familiar sad ritual they performed every time they met. "Laura," he corrected himself, his eyes kind. "Thank you for seeing me." "Please come in," she said, stepping aside, but he remained at the bottom of the porch steps, his expression grave. "Actually, I think it's better if you come with me. We've found something, an important piece of evidence, and I think you need to see it for yourself." "What is it?" she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "We found Emily's bicycle," he said, his voice steady and direct. The world went silent. Emily's bicycle. The little pink bike with the white basket and the purple streamers she'd refused to let anyone remove. It was the last thing she had been seen with, the vessel that had carried her away into nothingness. Where? Laura's questions tumbled out, a frantic cascade. How? It was discovered at an Airbnb property not far from here, buried. It would be best if you came with me to identify it, to be sure. Laura didn't hesitate. She grabbed her purse, locked the door to her silent house, and followed the detective to his car. The drive through the familiar winding streets of Cedarbrook Hollow was a blur. She realized they were heading down Oak Ridge Road, a route she took every single day on her way to work. When Harlan turned into the driveway of a large, modern, cedar-sided house, a profound chill washed over her. "I pass this house every day," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Every morning for 12 years I've driven right past this spot." The property was a hive of controlled activity. Police officers, forensics personnel in white suits, yellow crime scene tape cordoning off the garage. A man in a construction vest, Ryan Johnson, explained how his crew had been breaking up the concrete floor for a renovation when they found it. Buried. Harlan led her into the garage. A large section of the concrete floor had been broken away, revealing a dark, earthen pit about 3 feet deep. And there, at the bottom, partially covered in dirt and concrete dust, was a small, mangled pink bicycle. Even caked in grime and rust, she knew. "That's hers," she said, her voice barely audible. "That's Emily's bike." She stepped to the edge of the pit, an invisible force pulling her closer. It was her daughter's. The last thing Emily had touched, had loved. She pointed a trembling finger. "Those decorations. See the purple and pink streamers on the handlebars? They're faded, but they're still there. She loved them." Her voice broke on the last word, and a sob she had held back for years escaped her. "The bike had been deliberately placed there," the foreman said. "Buried deep, meant to be hidden forever." Was anything else?" Laura forced herself to ask the question that haunted her every waking moment. "No human remains, Laura," Harlan said gently, "just the bicycle." A wave of dizzying relief washed over her, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. It was a strange, terrible calculus of grief, to be grateful for the absence of your child's bones. They questioned the property caretaker, a nervous, stooped man named Ernest Mallory. He wrung his hands and shifted his weight, denying any knowledge. He blamed the owner, Vance Holloway, who lived in Switzerland. He suggested a long-term guest might have done it. He claimed the bike must have been buried during construction before he even started working there. Laura watched him, a cold knot of suspicion tightening in her gut. There was a furtive energy about him, a desperation in his denials that felt like more than just the unease of being questioned by police. Detective Harland assured her they would investigate every angle, contact the owner, and interview every guest who had ever stayed at the property. The bicycle, her first tangible link to Emily in 12 years, had cracked open a case that had been sealed shut by time and despair. For the first time in a very long time, Laura felt something other than the dull, constant ache of loss. It was a terrifying, fragile spark. It was hope. Back home, the house felt different. The silence was no longer empty, it was charged with anticipation. Laura went straight to her laptop. For 12 years, the Missing Children's Support Community Forum had been her sanctuary, a place where she could share her grief with other parents who understood the unique, unending torment of not knowing. Her fingers trembled as she typed out a new post, detailing the day's events, the discovery of the bike. She attached a photo she had taken at the scene, the image of the small pink bicycle in its earthen grave. The moment she hit post, her screen lit up with notifications, messages of support, of prayer, of shared hope. Then a private message notification appeared. She clicked it open. What she saw made the air leave her lungs in a single silent gasp. It was a photo she had shared on the forum years ago. Emily smiling, sitting proudly on her pink bicycle. But her daughter's bright, happy face had been replaced by the grotesque, bloody head of a dead pig, crudely photoshopped onto her small body. Below it, a short video clip. With a shaking hand, she clicked play. The video showed someone, hands only, chopping at a pig's head on a wooden block, then wrapping it in plastic. It was grainy, brutal, and sickeningly intimate. A single line of text accompanied it. "Your daughter's as dead as this pig. Just accept it and live with it." Laura scrambled away from the computer, a strangled sob tearing from her throat, and barely made it to the bathroom before she was violently ill. She slumped against the cool tile, her body shaking uncontrollably. Who would do this? What kind of monster would torment a grieving mother in such a depraved way? After what felt like an eternity, she forced herself back to the computer. She had to document it. She took screenshots, then sent a message to the anonymous user, a futile burst of rage. "Who are you?" She immediately called Detective Harland, her voice shaking as she explained the horrific message. He was calm, professional, but she could hear the steel in his voice. "I've got our tech team on it now, Laura. We'll trace it." He noted that the trees in the video's background looked like European alpine evergreens. The owner, Vance Holloway, lived in Switzerland. The timing was deeply suspicious. The rest of the night was a sleepless, agonizing vigil. Laura sat at her computer, dissecting the video with the help of the online community. They pointed out inconsistencies, digital artifacts, clues she would have missed. They were her army, her network of fellow warriors in a battle no one should have to fight. But beneath their support ran a new current of terror. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her to stop looking. By 4 a.m., sleep was a lost cause. Anxious energy coursed through her veins. She decided to go to work. The bakery was her refuge. The precise, methodical work of her craft was the only thing that could quiet the storm in her mind. She drove through the deserted pre-dawn streets of Cedarbrook Hollow. As she approached Oak Ridge Road, she automatically slowed down, her eyes drawn to the Airbnb property. And then she saw it. A light in one of the windows. A light that flickered, then went out. The house was supposed to be a sealed crime scene. Acting on an instinct she didn't understand, Laura turned onto the private road. A white van, not a police vehicle, was parked near the house. She parked her own car, hidden by the trees, and crept closer. A figure emerged from the house carrying something. Even in the dim light, she recognized the stooped, nervous posture. Ernest Mallory. He froze as her foot crunched on the gravel. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice tight with alarm. She stepped into the open. "It's Laura Forrester." His reaction was immediate and visceral. He flinched, taking a half-step back. He stammered out a flimsy excuse about the owner asking him to retrieve insurance papers for the police at 4 in the morning. His eyes darted around, never meeting hers. He was a terrible liar. She backed away, pretending to accept his story, and returned to her car. The moment she was inside, she called Harland. "That's absolutely false," the detective said, his voice sharp with urgency. "No one has permission to be on that property. I'm sending units." He told her to stay put, to wait. But as she watched Ernest's van pull away, a powerful primal certainty took hold. He was getting rid of evidence. The truth was in that van, driving away from her into the darkness. She couldn't let it go. "I'm sorry, detective," she whispered, putting her car in drive. "I have to follow him." The chase was tense and terrifying. She kept her distance, her heart pounding with every curve in the winding forest road. He pulled over once, and she saw him emerge from the woods after having started a fire, the acrid smell of chemical smoke hanging in the air. He was burning something. Then he continued on, turning onto a narrow lane that led to a small, isolated cul-de-sac. His home. She parked, hidden, and watched. What she saw next was bizarre. Ernest wheeled a large red fire trolley from his house to the van. He made 3 separate trips, each time struggling to load heavy, unseen objects from the trolley into the back of the van. She was on the phone with Harland again, whispering updates, when Ernest got back in his van and started to drive away. Just as his van passed her hiding spot, the world erupted in flashing lights. The police sirens off had arrived. They formed a perfect, inescapable blockade. Laura watched as they pulled a defeated Ernest from his van. She saw Harland direct his officers to the back of the vehicle. She got out of her car, drawn by an invisible thread, and walked toward the scene. "You should prepare yourself, Laura," Harland said, his face grim. An officer opened the van's rear doors. Inside were 3 black body bags. Laura's world stopped. The hope that had flickered to life just yesterday was extinguished in a single brutal moment. But then Harland's voice cut through her roaring grief. "They're alive, Laura. All 3 of them. Heavily sedated, but alive." A paramedic carefully unzipped the first bag. A young woman lay inside, her blonde hair pale in the flashing lights. Her face was thinner, older, but it was a face Laura had traced in her memory 1,000,000 times. The curve of her cheek, the shape of her nose. It was her. "Emily," Laura breathed, her legs giving out. Harland caught her, holding her steady. She watched, stunned, as they loaded her daughter and 2 other young women into the ambulance. Ernest, standing in handcuffs, saw her looking at him, and his face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "You should have accepted it," he screamed at her. "She was dead to you. You should have just lived with it." The words from the message. It was him. In the ambulance, Laura took her daughter's hand. It was the hand of a woman, not a child. But it was Emily's hand. After 12 years of searching, of hoping, of grieving a ghost, her daughter was real. She was here. The hospital was a blur of medical jargon and efficient movement. Emily was stable. The other 2 girls, missing for over a decade, were also alive. Ernest's house was a house of horrors, a soundproofed bunker beneath the floor where he had kept his family, raising them on a diet of lies about a war-torn world outside, a world where their parents were dead. He was their savior, their caretaker. Hours later, Laura sat by Emily's hospital bed waiting. Just before 8 a.m., her daughter's eyelids fluttered. "Mom?" The voice was hoarse, a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound Laura had ever heard. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me." Tears streamed down both their faces. The reunion was a fragile, miraculous thing. Emily, weak but lucid, told them about the abduction, the bunker, the other girls. She told them how Ernest had said he was saving them from neglectful parents. Later, Detective Harlan filled in the most horrifying detail. Ernest's journals revealed his ultimate plan. As the girls neared adulthood, he was preparing to sell them to an international trafficking ring he'd connected with on the dark web. He was planning to move them this week, Harlan said, his voice grave. If you hadn't been unable to sleep, if you hadn't gone to work early, if you hadn't seen that light and decided to follow him. He didn't need to finish. The thought was a chasm of terror. She had saved her daughter's life, not once, but twice. As Emily drifted back to sleep, Laura held her hand, vowing never to let go. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be therapy, legal proceedings, and the monumental task of helping a young woman reclaim a life that had been stolen from her. But they would face it together. After 12 years of living in the hollows of memory, her house would finally be filled with life again. It wasn't a coincidence, she thought. It was the stubborn, relentless, unyielding power of a mother's love, a force that had refused to let her daughter's ghost be the end of the story.